Dear friends, today is the 15th of December 2020, and we can already say that we have a difficult year behind us. An unprecedented health crisis that has yet to show its economic, social, and political consequences to the modern society. And here we are on our fourth National Internet Governance Forum, IGF MKD 2020, and given the circumstances, we're using an online format. This is usually saved for the end, but I would like to say in the beginning how grateful I am to everyone involved in this year's edition. I must admit that with all our associates while preparing the IGF 2020, I sensed an additional motivation to keep it in these circumstances and to ensure its continuity precisely in the year when we passed a big so-called milestone for many national and regional initiatives, and that is establishing a legal format in line with the local legislation. Also, huge gratitude goes to the participants, speakers, panelists who responded and thus enriched our event. For those who are with us for the first time, few words about the global IGF and IGF MKD as a NRI, National Regional Internet Governance Initiative. In 2006 in Tunisia, in the World Summit for Information Society WSIS, under the auspices of the United Nations, established the Global IGF Forum on Internet Governance in order to open, initiate an ongoing, non-binding, and I underscore this, non-binding dialogue among all stakeholders, so-called multi-stakeholder dialogue. Further in my presentation, I will use the respective Macedonian notion. This is a generally accepted translation of the multi-stakeholder dialogue notion. And probably if it weren't for the non-binding dialogue, the idea would have been condemned to fail at the beginning already. The notion of internet governance has been expanded beyond its narrow technical aspects. According to the Professor Jovan Kurbalia, one of the, we can already say, doyens of the theme of internet governance on the global level and founder of the Diplo Foundation. The broad approach in defining the internet governance goes beyond technical and infrastructural aspects and expands to other legal, economic, developmental, and sociological and cultural issues. As a discussion platform, IGF is striving to bring to the same table different stakeholders on national, regional, or global level as equal interlocutors in order for them to exchange information and share policies and practices related to internet and digital technologies. The global IGF is also trying to give an opportunity to the stakeholders from all countries, including developing countries, to engage in the debate on internet governance, and is making a serious contribution to building capacities in the respective countries so that they can acquire knowledge and skills that will facilitate their participation in the existing international institutions on internet governance in line with the principle of inclusion. The global IGF, throughout the years, identified a broad spectrum of key issues that the international community is facing, and in a specific way it shaped the political decisions related to internet and technologies throughout the world. You must have asked yourself, how is this technological miracle functioning? Oh, it is no longer a miracle, we have gotten used to it. And who is behind it? The answer is that IGF is just one of the stakeholders. Please, Anastas, bring the slides. Who runs the internet? Thank you. In order to ensure interoperability, there are several key technical and regulatory aspects of the fundamental infrastructure that is in the hands of the Internet Corporation, ICANN, on domains and numbers. And one of the bodies of ICANN is GAC, a Governmental Advisory Committee, composed of representatives of governments of many countries, which harmonizes regulations that the governments are then implementing on the local and national level. They are adopting it, incorporating it into the national legislation. Technical support and standardization for the fundamental protocols of the Internet, IPv4 and now IPv6, is an activity of the Task Force, Internet Engineering Task Force, not-for-profit international organization that anyone can join if they can offer relevant technical expertise. IGF is not bringing resolutions or any binding decisions. Its importance lies in the efforts to facilitate the discourse between the governments, non-governmental organizations, private companies, technical community, academia, and civic organizations that are involved or are interested in issues related to Internet governance. The IGF gatherings are places to discuss the proposed regulatory frameworks, potential risks, global trends, as well as the best and the worst practices that were already adopted or that are discussed at the moment. IGF is attended by everybody, China, Russia, United States, EU, India, Pakistan. For as long as the dialogue is non-binding, it will go on. Otherwise, the ideas of a Chinese or a Russian internet, or I don't know what internet, will grow louder, and the risk of the so-called fragmentation would grow, and that would be quite in contravention of the concept of the WWW, World Wide Web. And finally, IGF is envisaged to serve as a laboratory, neutral space where all actors could ask questions or to express their discontents or dilemmas. And now a bit about our national story. IGF-MKD is recognized and part of the register of the NRIs, National Regional Initiatives of the Global IGF, and you can see this at the website of the Global IGF. What does NRI mean? This is an abbreviation for national, sub-regional, regional, and youth initiatives of the IGF. For instance, NRIs are the IGFs organized on the national level in different countries. For instance, our Macedonian IGF with the abbreviation MKD, or IGF, Croatian IGF, or ALB, Albanian IGF, Germany IGF, IGF USA, etc. And to be politically correct, why didn't I mention, for instance, our neighbors, Bulgaria and Serbia? They have national ISOC chapters and they do not have an NRI IGF, but we will discuss this in another opportunity. For now, I will mention that ISOC is one of the key players in the IG ecosystem. Maybe you saw this on the slide that was shown before, and of course, if you have no information, you can Google and see what is the role of the ISOC, Internet Society. Examples of sub-regional organizations, initiatives, are CIDIC, which comprises the Southeast Europe, SEE, plus Ukraine, Armenia, Georgia, and an example of a regional Internet governance initiative is EuroDig, the region of Europe, not just the EU, plus CIDIC, so it is expanded beyond it. On a regional and sub-regional level, the national and regional initiatives are organized depending on the size of the geographical area, and main criteria to identify the region is geography, but in some cases language, culture, historical traditions, etc. And the shared objective or goal for all national and regional initiatives is to abide by the general values and principles of the IGF, promoting the multi-stakeholder model, inclusion, raising awareness about the salient issues and problems, and proposing decisions through discussion, non-party and not-for-profit character. NRIs are independent in its organization and functioning, or still, it is expected that they respect the main principles of the global IGF and its modalities of working, and to cooperate and to support each other. If we would look at the programs from previous years of our national IGF, you can see that we have always tried to transpose the multi-stakeholder model, having always with us representatives of the government, the ministries, the parliament as a decision maker, non-governmental organizations, the technical community, the private sector, as well as the academia, in order to facilitate the discourse and the discussion and as a way to raise the awareness. Also, we have always tried to create a link to the regional and sub-regional initiatives, EuroDig and CDIG. How successful we have been in this, I couldn't comment. I will just remind you that since the beginning of our national and regional forums, we alerted to the risk and the consequences of fake news and misinformation and the responsibility of the internet providers. That trend was observed, identified in these discussions even before it reached the general population. And unfortunately, because this model presupposes listening to everybody's opinion, or let's not say unfortunately, but since this model presupposes that everybody's opinion will be heard and no ready-made solutions will be imposed, as democratic societies, we will need to pass this early disease of early digitalization through commonly accepted norms of conduct. Without further ado, I would like to thank you for your attention and give the floor to Predrag and Marko and our guest, Olga. You have the floor. Thank you, Alexander. Good day, everyone. First of all, does everyone hear me well? Yes, great. Before we begin with the agenda, first of all, I would like to thank the IGF and all colleagues for the success and the way in which we carried this through. And I also wish to mention that I will be your host at today's virtual event. And we will follow the agenda step by step. Today we will discuss several themes. First, the current salient issues, and then look into the future. Before we begin with the agenda, I would like to say that if you have any questions, Zoom gives you an opportunity to ask the questions to everyone in the chat window, and if you would like to engage live, you have the possibility to raise your hand, and then you could also join with sound and video. As Alexander introduced us, we would like to talk to our representative Olga about the perspectives of the regional and international IGF event, and we will begin in English since she doesn't speak Macedonian.
Being a part of such an event, and we will be very kind and very pleased to have you. And we would like to go on the panel where we will discuss the retrospectives of the regional and global IGF events. That is CDIG, EuroDig, ICANN, and global IGF. Those are most of the events that were happening this year, and those are the events what Alexander did give us a kind of introduction of what they are. I just wanted to make sure that we can hear you, you can unmute yourself, and then we can go with the questions. And later on, we will have a presentation or video presentation from Marko Pawlowski for the youth IGF events.
Hi, Predrag. Hi, everyone. And I don't understand that much of Macedonian, but just a bit of what is, at least a bit sounds like Ukrainian, but the rest.
Good. Thank you, Olga. So, as we said, due to the current pandemic situation, most of the events on the internet governance spectrum were held as a webinar, or in other words, as a virtual and remote online format. What kind of challenges and difficulties did the organizations face, from organizational, technical, and of course, community timely aspects, please?
First of all, I'm thinking that I would refrain from using the term virtual, because indeed it is used way too often, but I strongly believe that it has some negative connotation, as it makes people intuitively diminish the feasibility of the results that might be achieved during such meetings. And also it diminishes the value of interactions that we have during the online meetings. So while the online meetings have quite a few pitfalls, I think we should take it as a baseline that they are not becoming less real just because people are not sitting in the same conference room as they used to. So I would rather talk about online meetings than virtual meetings. And the second point, which is important, I believe that COVID-19 pandemic left us with no choice about going online. The circumstances were totally beyond our control, and we had somehow to adjust our work. But at the same time, this pandemic showed us how important is the role of the internet and also the job that we are doing in internet governance field during all these years. I believe that if the internet was not there, probably our COVID-19 chronicles would have been so much different from what they used to be. So going online was totally new and was totally different for all of us. It was something none of us has been prepared before and none of us has done before. But despite all these challenges, I can say that all of us wanted to make something happen, even if we could not meet in the same place as we used to be, as we used to do during many years before. And of course, there were some challenges to address. First of all, we had to totally reconsider the technical and the programmatic setup. After a few months, when we were so much excited about the convenience of online meetings, we faced new challenges, which have been the decreased attention span and also the overall Zoom fatigue. And moreover, the broader other meetings, for example, if we talk about the global IGF or ICANN meetings, then it is even more complicated to find the time zone, which would feel ideally perfect all participants, which are basically coming from all corners of the world. Also, with too many online meetings, it was very difficult to make people first register for the event and then to stay and then to attend throughout the whole event, which, for example, in case with the global IGF lasted for a few weeks in a row, which was quite complicated to follow. And also, we had to be inventive. We had to find the ways how to make people interested and engaged and how to stand out among all the like hundreds and hundreds of online meetings which were happening during these last months. I must also admit that we had to quite considerably review the agenda, and you know that perfectly well as a member of the program committee of CDIC annual meeting, because when the COVID-19 pandemic happened, of course, we wanted to highlight the challenges and the opportunities which came with that, but also we did not want to turn it into a conference of the World Health Organization. So we had to find the balance between reflecting various topics in the agenda. And I must say that probably the most difficult thing was to replicate the social networking of in-person meetings, which is way too complicated when you have just online event. And of course, you have to be much more stress resistant when you run online meeting, because even if you organize everything perfectly, the chances that something will go wrong are very high. You might have disconnections, you might lose your speakers in the middle of the presentation, or as you even see with your event today, and what I've read recently about the online meetings, that 95% of them are starting late just because, for example, we are waiting for more people to connect or for some technical issues to be solved. And this is the reality. We have to deal with that.
Indeed. And thanks a lot for bringing such challenges. And speaking of regional internet government events that happen in Europe, such as ERODIC 2020 and CDIC 6. Can you give us what were the main focus on the regional IGFs, topics that were tackled, and what kind of output we have? I know that I do remember that ERODIC 2020 was one of the first digital and online event, and it was a lesson learned for every others that were following.
Thank you. I think that probably for ERODIC it was a bit more complicated than for us at CDIC, because we could already take their experience as lessons learned exercise and make something a bit different or adjust the agenda. So I would start from CDIC as it is something which is, let's say, closer to my heart. So for CDIC this year, we had 4 thematic tracks, namely Internet infrastructure, digitalization, trust and security, and advanced technologies, which were uniting 9 main sessions, which was scattered during the whole week. And we knew that having 8 hours of Zoom was not going to work. So we just somehow distributed the sessions throughout the week and had no more than 2 thematic sessions during the day, and then topped that up with some creative elements. And we tried to make it as much close to our region as possible. For example, we talked about digitalization and depopulation in Southeastern Europe and neighboring area. We talked about the practice of the countries with implementation of new internet standards like IPv6 and DNSSEC. We also were talking about 5G deployment. We were talking about the important and quite recent practice of deploying COVID-19 tracking apps, readiness of our region for artificial intelligence, and many, many more. When we talk about EuroDIC, they were also discussing somehow similar topics. They were talking about the digital sovereignty. They were discussing the United Nations Secretary roadmap for digital cooperation. They were discussing domain name system, also environmental sustainability and digital transformation. So let's see, many of these topics were very close and very interrelated between each other, and each of us tried to somehow reflect the reality of COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Olga, very much. And as I remember, last year in November, we were all together in Berlin, Global IGF. I really do miss the time. We had lovely time as well and everything. And this year we were supposed to go and all together to meet face to face in Poland. And unfortunately, as you already mentioned, that didn't happen. But then, on the other hand, we had a fruitful 2 weeks online discussions. Can you give us what was the outcome of the Global IGF 2020?
That's true that would have been much better to meet in person. I don't want to diminish, as I said today already, the value of the online meetings, but of course, in-person meetings, they are an experience in themselves. And personally, for me, it was quite difficult to follow this year's IGF, because I think it was even 3 weeks, and it was quite difficult to find time apart from all the daily things and the daily job that we have to do to follow the sessions. Especially, it is getting difficult because some sessions are run simultaneously, and of course you can switch between them easily than running between the rooms in the conference hall. But still, I think that it is what is the most complicated probably is a matter of priority, because for me personally, when I'm attending a face-to-face event, then for me it would be my primary focus. Of course, I might do some things in the background, but I'm listening to what people are talking about. And this is totally different with the online event, because simultaneously people are doing checking emails, doing some other tasks, and they are basically staying in under the same desk, wearing the same pajamas. Many of the people are not even trying to change something. And I think this is what makes it different. And even if we think how many connections we have made with the people when we were attending the face-to-face meeting, I'm not sure that you and me would meet, for example, in an online event and stay connected if we did not meet at an in-person event. So this is, I think, the highest value possible of the in-person interaction.
Indeed, and that is totally true. I totally agree with you. And one last event that we had this year, it is the ICANN 69. I know that you have taken a very good participation in this event. And what were the main highlights from the remote event and the main focus topics? You already mentioned some of them that we have tackled them during the the CDIC, but what were the main focus? Was it the pandemic, or they were talking more about the security and other topics?
I think ICANN is probably one of those internet governance forums which was the best equipped and ready for such a situation as COVID-19 pandemic, because they have quite extensive resources, both human, technical, and financial, and there is a lot of the work already happening in between the annual sessions. So people who are part of the community, they are ready to, and they are used to such a mode of work. And in terms of the topics that have been tackled at ICANN meetings, there was just probably very slight change because the majority of the topics are being followed from meeting to meeting, but just with the pandemic, there has been a slight focus on the DNS security and the new types of attacks which have been increased because of the pandemic. But in the rest, the topics remained the same, and the community continued working in between the meetings. And even I was thinking, when we were discussing about whether we should move CDIC online, I was thinking that, okay, we are not ICANN. For them, it is their normal format of work. There is a lot of this in between the meetings work, but whether people would still be interested just to discuss policy issues, not the very technical issues online. But I'm happy we tried that, and it worked. But I think ICANN is a very good example to look at and to take their experiences.
Olga, thank you very much for taking a participation in our event, and sorry for the short notice, but we had to tackle all these technicalities, and especially that I'm in Berlin. And thank you very much. I wish you a pleasant holiday season and Happy New Year, and take care and stay safe, please.
Thank you very much. Wishing you good luck for your national IGF, and same holiday wishes goes to you and the whole team.
Thank you.
Now I will go back to the youth activities that we undertook and where Macedonian IGF participated in the course of 2020. So could my colleague Anastas share the video by Marko Palovski? A brief retrospective of youth projects, initiatives and events that took place this year where I participated. First among the events was CDIC Youth School. This year I was part of the organizational board. As the other events this year, this program as well took place online in full. Both phases were completely online. What is interesting and positive for us is that we had many applications from Macedonia this year, 9. Compared to other years, this is a large number, which positions are on the third place by number of applications. The first Turkey with 19, Albania had 18, and Macedonia had a total of 9 applications. 35 participants were selected in the first stage, 3 from Macedonia. Unfortunately, in the second stage, only 1 application from Macedonia continued. Our second event was ICANN, the program Next Gen, which is intended for students from the continent where the ICANN conference is taking place. So this year, I had the opportunity to be part of 12 students selected for Europe. There was 2 of us were from the region, I from Macedonia, and Daniel Kalemani, who is from Albania but is a student in Greece. The program consists of 3 weeks. In the first week is preparation, the second is community days, and the third is plenary week. I had the opportunity in the first week to have a brief presentation on the involvement of young people in the internet governance world and how these programs contribute to a bigger reach to young people, or from young people. The second is the Global Internet Governance Forum in the program Internet Society, which is called IGF Global Society Youth Ambassadors. For the first time, the 30 selected participants in this program from the entire world had mentors. Mentors are people who have already participated in the program in the previous years. So I had the opportunity to be a mentor to Simona Chaminska, who is from Macedonia but lives in Poland and works in the Deutsche Telekom. Simona is more than happy with the program, the full program that lasted for 2.5 months, and is interested to have deeper knowledge of the internet governance world and her greater involvement. Also, Alexandra Ivankovic is from Serbia. Among the 30 selected participants, they were the only ones from the region. Something new compared to previous week is the Internet Telecommunication Union, the youth group for Europe, where I was selected, also many other young people from the region. We will be divided into groups and we will work on declaration and proposals, draft proposals on the 10 priorities of the Berlin Declaration on Digital Societies. By the end of January, we should produce them and they will be presented at the annual conference of the World Telecommunication Development Conferences 2021 in November in Ethiopia. An update to current events. At the moment, the Youth Coalition on Internet Governance group has elections for the steering committee, where Alexandra Ivankovic, which I mentioned from Serbia, is a candidate for East Europe, for our region. And another interesting data is the Global Youth IGF initiative. As of today, it is organizing UGF battles where young people with different positions on same topics debate and compete with different arguments, with different theses. I will take part in this on Friday, on the 18th of December. And more or less those were in brief all the events related to youth initiatives, events and projects for this year. Thank you. Marco? Without further ado, because we are slightly behind the agenda, now we can already continue with the current affairs. Next presentation is digitalization of the educational process in times of crisis, which will be presented by Dr. Alexandra Natyeva-Ruzhin, coordinator of the National Platform for Distance Learning from the Ministry of Education and Science. You have the floor. We can hear you. Good day, everybody. Congratulations on the organization of the 4th edition to the organizers, and I'm grateful to Professor Mishev for inviting me. I will try and share the topic of my presentation today is digitalization of the educational process during crisis, and I will begin my presentation with a rhetorical question, and that is, why digitalization of the education? Namely, rapid digitalization over the past decade influenced transformation of several aspects of societal life. Labor markets, future of jobs did not leave the education systems behind. They are part of the digital transformation, which is stimulated by the progress in connectivity, wide access to digital devices and applications, and growing demand in digital skills. According to the European Commission analysis, 90% of jobs in all sectors in the future will require some digital skills, and their demand will grow in parallel with the involvement of artificial intelligence, data analysis. At the moment, again, according to the analysis and projections of the European Union, member states have shortage of experts, including data analysts, computer safety analysis, software development, and experts in machine learning. 58% of companies that have some digital experts say that there are difficulties in recruiting, and 78% of them indicate that appropriate skills would be basis for new investments. This is key for the implementation of the European Green Deal and for achieving the goal of climate neutrality. Digital technologies are the foundation for the green economy, including circular economy, decarbonization of the energy sector, transport, construction, agriculture, and other sectors and industries. The European Union over the past decade has seen many initiatives on digitalization of education and digital skills, but despite the good examples, such initiatives are mainly short-lived with limited scope and marginal influence on a systemic level. It is seen that this is a result of the perception for limited potential for digitalization of the education. Such perception dramatically changed with the emergence of COVID-19 pandemic, which had a strong influence on the educational systems. In difficult circumstances, the pandemic left us with no choice but to start applying digital technologies. It is precisely this situation of no choice that accelerated digital transformation and brought about previously unseen application of technologies in education. The evolution that normally would have lasted years or decades with the linear development happened over a matter of weeks. This period of tectonic changes with the feeling of urgency regarding digital education and public consultations in the European Union during the summer in difficult circumstances of pandemic led to rapid application of digital technologies and tools for digital learning to be applied hastily and sometimes in unplanned fashion. This created new opportunities for all stakeholders in the education process, but also disclosed systemic weaknesses that prevented successful digitalization of digital skills in the education process, primarily lack of preparedness of teaching staff. In the European Union, the international research on teaching in 2018 showed that only 39% of teachers in the European Union believe that they are well or very well prepared to use digital technologies in their everyday work, with significant differences between different member states. Despite the Action Plan 2018-2020 on digital learning, which presented digital systems for the new era, the consultations showed that before the crisis, almost 60% of teachers had no experience with distance learning. With regards to Macedonia, as in many other countries in the world, closing of schools at the beginning of March this year in order to prevent further spread of the virus has seen us unprepared. In the absence of a strategy, even teachers in the same school had individual and different crisis solutions using Facebook, Messenger, Edumondo, Zoom, Skype, and other platforms. This led to a general cacophony in application of various platforms, digital tools and solutions, and in also grading this distance learning. The initial findings from the research with the directors, teachers, and parents about the experiences from distance learning in the second semester of the school year implemented by Reactor showed that the teaching process was inefficient. Namely, 33% of teachers participating reported that they could not have contact with the pupils or parents, and 44% did this with significant delay. 54% report on increased number of difficulties pupils have in learning the teaching material, and only 10% say that there have not been significant differences. 49%, 23 plus 26, if you look at the graph on the left hand side, of parents participating in the research has assessed the distance learning as completely inefficient or partially inefficient with grades 1 or 2, while only 37 gave it the grade 3 and only 15% said that it was between 4 and 5, the highest marks. If you look at the right hand side, the median value is 3.5 of the grades, the total value of distance learning over the past year. The quality of teaching in schools was marked with 2.7 as a median value. A solution for such problems was sought in developing and implementing national distance learning platform, and we will begin discussions on the platform. First of all, what are the initial points to develop the platform? Why was it developed? First of all, it was a result of the COVID-19 crisis. The platform was implemented in response to crisis situation in order to ensure continuity of the education process in the school year 2020-2021. Stemming from the deficiencies identified in the first semester with the beginning of COVID-19 crisis, the aim is to provide uniform standard in distance learning in all parts of the country, in all secondary and primary schools. The intention is for it to be a sustainable solution, to have functionality that will ensure that regular teaching is supplemented beyond pandemic. It is interesting to note that public consultations in the European Union show that as much as 96% of the participants mean that the pandemic is a turning point after which there is no turning back when it comes to use of technology in education. The platform is envisaged to be functional, stable, and simple to use by teachers and students as its users, and also by other stakeholders in the educational process. On a long-term basis, it needs to be a base to integrate other segments, such as progress tracking of teachers, progress of students, progress of teachers for their educational goals, and other segments. Also, on a longer term, it is foreseen that the platform will integrate tools that will provide assistance for the children with special needs, having in mind that the platform at this moment provides support only for pupils with dyslexia. There will be integration of aspects providing assistance and support to students with developmental difficulties, and the main aim is to improve the educational system and adapt it to the new era. More than 258,000 students and more than 28,000 teachers are users of the platform, as it was mentioned, in all public primary and secondary schools in the country. The Ministry of Education, of course, as the body in charge of educational system, Bureau for Education Development, and the State Education Inspectorate. The Ministry of Education and Science has asked that the platform be developed by the Faculty for Information Sciences and Technologies, FINKI, and it also involved several institutions from 4 sectors: public, academia, private sector, and donor community and non-governmental organizations. From the public sector, Ministry of Education and Science, and Ministry of Information, Society and Administration, as well as the Bureau for Education Development. Teachers, I primarily refer to national trainers, I will mention them later, and the local self-government. FINKI participated in optimization of the infrastructure of the platform, and Microsoft partners in the country that the government has an agreement with on purchasing Microsoft licenses in some segments, in one segment, and that is preparation and production of the promotional video. The donor community was involved as well. And it illustrates the involvement of all sectors and institutions in the implementation of various stages of development and the implementation. You will see that in almost all activities, the Ministry of Education and Science and the Faculty for Information Sciences and Computer Technologies is involved, as well as the national trainers. There are some segments we expected more, but the private sector had significant involvement. The institutions that I mentioned before. This is a visualization on how this September of 2020 looked in terms of development and implementation of the platform. Only the key activities were marked, which required some time. One of the maybe most complex activities, which is very difficult in the overall complex project, still this is an activity that is possibly most complex, was training of the teaching staff, considering the fact that we have more than 28,000 teachers in the public primary and secondary schools. To the surprise of many, this training followed the plan almost entirely. It was implemented on 3 levels: primary, secondary, and tertiary level, and it took some 20 days. The main contributor to this success were the 30 national trainers who were selected from the ranks of teaching staff, who were instrumental not only to hold the training on the secondary level to 1,200 school trainers and more than 460 reserve trainers, but they were also successfully involved in the implementation of the platform, such as producing 37 instructions and guidelines, 38 video tutorials in Macedonian and Albanian language for the end users of the platform. Such complex project must be associated with numerous challenges. I would note the short time for development and implementation of the platform, just 1 month, which was impossibly short, it turned out, regardless of the fact that the activities ran day and night. Considering the fact that the platform is by far the largest system in the country, considering the number of daily users, it required outstanding technical expertise and managing qualities in development of all individual features, leaving no room for any omissions or mistakes. And the national database on education was a challenge that exceeded our expectations, but when we look at the challenge from a positive perspective, by purging the data from the national database and migration and synchronization of the data with the national platform, the project contributed to updating of the data, which is a starting point for any future reforms in this area in the country. Despite the large challenges, the purpose, the aim was clearly communicated by the entire team. The plan was detailed and team members were selected successfully, so the project was completed within the deadline. What does it mean? Online training is carried out without impediments, beginning with the start of the school year this year, 1st of October. Stress tests carried out at the end of September showed that some reorganization is required for the platform, reorganization of certain functionalities, and this was done successfully by reallocating the teaching directly to Microsoft Teams before the school year started. Central teaching is done in accordance with the initially established design of the platform. Presentation of all teaching materials, homework and testing can be done via the platform. In the meantime, think in cooperation with the national educators and of course Ministry of Education and Science is carrying out further optimizations of the platform on an ongoing basis in order to provide for additional improvement of its functionalities, improving stability and providing better quality experience to all users. What did we learn with the pandemics? Not just us, the EU member states learned this as well. First of all, in the EU, the experiences between different member states show that the systems and institutions for education that had invested a lot in their digital capacity previously were better prepared to carry out the teaching, to motivate the students and to continue providing the education services. For us, the pandemics disclosed the key factors for an effective digital education, which are primarily related to the availability of stable internet connections, digital equipment for teachers and students, then having and involving teachers who are competent in digital technologies, leadership and vision in the institutions, and skills and cooperation in order to share good practices and teaching methods. Also, the crisis showed that it takes different pedagogical approaches in the teaching, or the traditional teaching compared to traditional teaching with the physical presence, developing adequate digital skills and activities for this begin now at the level of EU, but also here, and more support to mental health and well-being of students and teachers. What are the next steps? First, The issue at the moment, after we overcame the initial unplanned and crisis stage, which was a result of force majeure and was something that all teachers, parents, and educational system as a whole were faced with, it grew into a stage where it is required to think it out well, to summarize the results from the previous period, and to pave a long-term path towards digital education. In the EU, the announcement from the European Educational Area, a new plan for digital education 2021-2027 was adopted, focusing on long-term digital transformation of the education in the member states. The action plan goes to support the aim of the European Skills Agenda. Beginning in 2025, the aim of the EU is to have 70% of population aged 16 to 74 to possess at least basic digital skills. The action plan also directs member states to increase the financing for digital education as a key investment for the planned and adopted transition. In our country, we are in the process of adopting a strategy for digitalization of the education. It will take into consideration the results from the implementation of the National Education Distance Education Platform. It will also be based on the new plan of the UN Digital Agenda for the Western Balkans. The strategy would need to foresee the principles and measures to improve digital literacy, skills and capacities at all education levels, and for all skills levels, starting from the basic ones and towards the advanced levels. I would like to thank you once again, congratulate you on the event, and I wish you successful continuation of today's presentations. And at the end of the day, we are here to provide all questions and answers you might have regarding this presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Alexandra, for the introduction to the process of digital education during crisis. And the next to speak is protection of consumers and their online rights. It will be presented by Professor Neda Zdraveva, PhD, from the Faculty of Law, Skopje. Can you hear me? Yes, apologies. There was some interference previously to the connection. I could not hear you well, and I need to apologize. There is an unforeseen obligation, and that is always a problem with online conferences, especially when you're at your workplace. Somebody might always come and tell you that you need to come urgently. If the conference is taking place outside, they would not be able to call you. So my presentation will be a bit shorter than originally planned. It is related to the protection of consumers' rights when it comes to online transactions. That was a really salient issue over the past period, since there was a really increased online activity in the sphere of purchasing. Macedonian law on consumer protection is dealing online transactions as contracts. These are activities that are harmonized with the Macedonian legislation. So here Macedonian consumer is protected in the same way that the consumers at the level of European Union are. Was there a problem with the internet? I don't know if I will be able to share the presentation. I will try it now. If the host can authorize screen sharing for me. It shows the share host, disable participants. It seems that I am a participant. Regardless, I will leave the presentation in the chat so that colleagues can see it, because there is an emergency situation where I need to attend. What the Macedonian legislator guarantees is that the consumers, when such contracts are enforced, has certain rights that first, regarding the way in which they acquired information, quantity of information shared, and how they can leave the deal that they entered into. Our legislation provides that there are numerous such informations, and they contain a number of messages that should reach the consumers. Main features of the goods and services: identity of the trader, seat of the trader, geographical location, the price they need to pay, including taxes, costs, breakdown of the price, communication costs in order to have communication with the trader, payment modalities for the goods, delivery modalities, modalities for enforcing the contract, how complaints are handled, information related to the specific right to withdraw from contracts online, which practically means that within 14 days from the delivery of the goods, without any explanation whatsoever, even if the goods are completely identical, and especially when the goods are completely identical to the goods offered in the online sale, for reasons known only to the purchaser, without any need to elaborate or explain to anybody, they can return the goods and withdraw from the contract. Information related to the legal guarantee, conditions for post-sale assistance. This pandemic, because of the dynamics in resolving the pandemic's problems, showed that we have two types of traders. I will use it in quotation marks in parentheses because not all of them are traders. Some are registered as companies. They do carry out sales lawfully, and they are legally on the market. Others are price inbox traders. They sell consumer goods, the quantity of which is the origins, the features are not known, which are outside of any economic structure, and they are not traders. They are natural persons who are trading in things. What is the price? I'll tell you in inbox. The aim of today's event, I will try again to share my screen. For the purposes of today's conference, I carried out a brief research on the features of standard traders and the price inbox traders. The characteristics of the goods or services are displayed, but with the later you don't always have the real idea. The identity of the trader is known, for the inbox traders is not. The seat might exist for the first group, very difficult to identify for the second group. The price differs, and it is not easily accessible. Communication costs call me on my mobile phone. We'll tell you the inbox traders. Payment modalities, they don't always give you certificate of payment on delivery. Information related to withdrawal rights are not clear for the legal traders as well. Legal guarantees exist for the ones of them and not for the second group. It is unknown how this will be resolved. There are some among them who are really proper in their conduct, and post-sale assistance, trade guarantees, code of conduct. This is something that not even regular traders have. And I apologize for the very super fast presentation. I will be back for the questions and answers session. I hope. I will need to disconnect. Thank you, Neda. No problem, of course. One of the main challenges for the online events are the daily obligations that we have. The agenda specifies that the next presentation is protection of the intellectual property rights and responsibility of internet service providers. Bojan Stevkovski, legal advisor of Net Balkan and Enforcement, is our presenter. Good day, everybody. Do you hear me? Thank you for the introduction. I would also like to thank for the invitation to participate in today's forum. I would like to share the presentation. Please confirm if you can see it. First of all, I would like to say a few words about the organization I represent, REACT. REACT is a not-for-profit organization that exists for more than 30 years now, and its main focus is fight against counterfeiting and protecting intellectual property for the REACT members. These are rights holders, actual brands. Our organization was established in cooperation with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce in Amsterdam. The headquarters are based in Amsterdam as well. In addition to the headquarters, REACT also has its own offices in more regions globally, and where we do not have direct access through an office, we are operating through partners and attorneys in order to cover more than 100 countries in Europe and globally, where we protect the rights of our members. We have more than 300 companies that are our members from various sectors: fashion industry, technical industry, pharmaceutical industry, and all the rest. What is most important is that within this structure is the online enforcement team that is based in the REACT office in Skopje. Main roles of the online enforcement team are to monitor, to search for the overall internet on a global scale in order to detect forgeries and to protect the rights of our members. For this purpose, we have specialized teams that are based in Macedonia, China, India, Vietnam, Brazil, Russia, that have experts, analysts who are specialized in identification of sources, of ways in which information need to be processed in order to establish whether this internet forum is an original or counterfeit, sources of whether there was any other violation of intellectual property rights, and ways to then undertake action. which encompasses sending a request to the internet service providers or coordination with the local offices and representatives of React for further actions in conjunction with the local authorities such as police, market inspection and customs. For the purposes of this presentation, I would like to focus on 3 different parts, and I will place a bit more emphasis on the situation as we see it and developments in Macedonia. I would primarily focus on the MK top-level domain and developments regarding social media and increased sale through web shop platforms in Macedonia. After every section, where I will present what are our views on the state of play and the priority problems that need to be addressed, I would also make some suggestions regarding the ways in which we believe there should be action taken in 2021 and beyond. With regards to top-level domain, an important factor is perception of consumers. I will take the Timberland domain that already has its history, that enjoys a huge confidence of consumers. That would mean that any consumer that sees that some page shop is referenced through a domain that exists .com and the name of the brand or the company, then their confidence is much higher. Confidence in transaction compared to internet domains that contain some variations of known companies or have different generic domains. Why is this distinction important? .com domain is at a still relatively low level of development. Now is the very important moment to decide the direction that we would like to take in terms of the domain. It is very important to build confidence where all consumers will have the idea that companies that are marketed through this domain are the actual companies behind the brand, behind the company. As a simple example, I would like to say that a website timberland.mk, we would like to know that the consumers trusted that behind this shop is the actual Timberland company. Unfortunately, I must say that there is a bit of regression in this aspect. As an example, the first time we encountered problems regarding our member in 2010. An authorized company, an unauthorized company had a registered .mk domain for the respective brand, and it represented itself as the authorized distributor. In 2010, we resolved this problem with under the MARNET rules. They were not so developed, but they made a clear distinction which established that only the holder of a registered trademark can register an .mk domain containing that word. And we use that grounds to have a consensual agreement to resolve this problem and to ensure that the rights holder will get the domain. That was in 2010, while in 2013, with the update of the MARNET rules, the option of arbitration was introduced in cases where an agreement could not be reached in disputes of this nature. There was an option that called for a rapid procedure of deciding, and Marnet could decide via the arbitration process who will gain control over the domain that is registered. Unfortunately, a decision at the end of 2015, published in the official Gazette of 2016, a decision was made to suspend, to abolish this arbitration option, and there are no replacement solutions such as UDRP. All claims regarding all claims, parties are directed to handle them as civil cases in litigations, and the rules do not contain the provision that only the rights holder can register .mk domain identical to the trademark. Why is this important? Why do I consider this to be backsliding, regression to the situation? If all cases need to be taken to civil litigation, the time for its resolution in Macedonia, in a best case scenario, will be 1 to 3 years. And in a case of appeals before the appellate court, this time frame could be longer than 3 years. The costs for such procedure can be significantly high. It will be difficult for the parties, and the litigation procedure is rather complex. You need to involve specialist expertise, and the development, the course and the outcome, the decision in such procedures is highly unpredictable, because the structure in such courts does not foresee any specialization. There is a high probability that any case related to such dispute will be processed by a judge or a trial chamber that will encounter such matters for the first time. I selected the UDRP option as an alternative, Uniform Domain Resolution Procedure that was established by ICANN and accepted by several arbitration courts, including the WIPO Arbitration Center and the Czech Arbitration Center, which foresee a procedure where rights holders can within 1 to 3 months get the final decision regarding any complaint. The costs of such procedure are relatively fixed. The procedure is much simpler in comparison to the civil lawsuit, and such procedures are reviewed by already specialized panelists who are knowledgeable in the area of intellectual property and deciding in such cases. As a reference, in the Czech Arbitration Court, among tens of thousands of cases that have been opened, some 90% have been decided in favor of the rights holders, which is a high degree of positive decisions. If we need to look at the civil litigation only, civil lawsuit as interim measure, the only positive aspect is that we finally have first positive judgment in favor of the rights holder that requested to register a domain that was previously registered by another individual. The decision was passed in November 2020. It is still in appellate procedure. It is still not final. We are not sure whether this will be a legal precedent that we could rely on in the future. What are the solutions? I suppose that everybody will agree that the MK domain on the national domain should be built in a way that will lead to high confidence in consumers and retailers. A temporary measure should be proactive actions of rights holders who would register the domains that are free at the moment, and in cooperation with React or with similar organizations, we should monitor the cyberspace on an ongoing basis to see if some of the domains that they did not manage to register for their own purposes have been used maliciously or contrary to the purpose. But most important action, in my view, that should be taken as soon as possible is to begin cooperation with Marnet and with other organizations to review the option of introducing the UDRP procedure, something similar to it, for the .mk domain. I think that React can make a significant contribution to this because it has a significant contribution in such procedures. We have people who are specialized on this topic, so we could really contribute. The second part, social media. Important developments I could underscore is that we can see significant increase of sales through such media. We saw an ongoing, a constant increase over the past years, but now with the crisis this has grown even further. Primary factor is the low barrier for the beginning. For any natural or legal entity to start selling via these media, it is sufficient to create a profile and to run some basic paid advertisements that cost less than $1 a day, and they give you a reach to more than 5,000 consumers. An additional factor influencing the increase in trading is the independence in delivery. Several years ago, many small delivery and postal companies emerged offering delivery, which provided for easy and speedy delivery of any goods within several days to the consumers. In parallel, we can see increased participation of consumers. I'm referring also to the older generations that still might have some reservations towards using web shops and payment cards as instruments for sale and purchase. However, they normally engage in direct communication in chat, and this is how they engage with the traders, and this is how they order the goods. This gives them a greater comfort and supports the notion of reliability. But again, this is one of the ways in which bad actors, bad players misuse this opportunity. There was a post that we received some weeks ago. An account fictitiously registered as Posts of North Macedonia is offering a promotion of a gaming console. Considering the date it was published before PlayStation was available on the market, we are highly suspicious that this might be false offer, and this leads to significant deterioration, loss of trust in consumers, and it harms the reputation of the real rights holders and their ability to sell via the social networks. There are three focuses again that I would like to enumerate them on social media action in the foreseeable future. First of all, I believe there should be campaigns to raise the awareness in Macedonia. I think that the public sector institutions can influence this greatly, but it should be done also in cooperation with the non-governmental organizations and rights holders. This is further development of cooperation between the government and the rights holders. There was an initiative to cooperate with the Macedonian Coordinative Body for Intellectual Property Protection, where there were actions against some portals, and we have signed a memorandum for cooperation with the Customs Administration in order to manage the digital space as a new area to be monitored. And what I think is still not relevant here, but is practiced in the European Union, is the application of the so-called Know Your Customer obligation. This is an obligation that is foreseen in the e-commerce directive of the European Union. It tasks the internet service providers that are the carriers of communication via the platform to have clear and transparent information and ways to identify the natural or legal entities that are placing the products on the market. This means that we expect, but also the postal companies offering postal services need to have clear identification of the company that is selling. For the moment, this is rather inapplicable in Macedonia. Internet profiles are registered without any control or transparency in the background, while the postal parcels are delivered only on the basis of phone number without any returning address. And in the end, few words about the internet platforms, web shops, and the internet service providers. When I refer to internet service providers, I actually mean providers such as telecom providers who are offering the connection to the internet. In this context, we are actually referring to any stakeholder that offers any service on the internet. Platforms such as Pazar 3, although they do not run the sales directly, they are offering the sales space, and registrars that provide for domain registration and web hosting for the independent shops such as Neptune.mk as an example. In the European Union, for quite some time there is a practice based on L'Oreal versus eBay court dispute. Every internet service provider is bound to take action when they are informed of illegal activity or unlawful activity violating intellectual property, which is made possible by the services offered by the providers. In this way, there is a direct obligation on platforms such as eBay to act when there are ads with counterfeit goods, but also to registrars such as MK Host that provide for registration of a domain and hosting of contents. Basically, they impose on them direct obligation to take specific action, be it suspension or deleting some contents in cases when they are informed of online violations. React, for its part, has a role to play. We are actively monitoring what is happening in the internet space, and we then file applications to the internet service providers to act. A positive example was through Pazar 3, who has a framework procedure for easy reporting of a violation. And recently, a week ago, we had a specific case where upon our application within a matter of hours, this ad with counterfeit goods was removed. What I don't see here at the moment and has not been tested in its legal form is the responsibility of registrars in terms of actions for independent web shops. We are monitoring the situation. There was no need for us to take specific actions through a Macedonian provider or a registrar that we would need to take court action. But I'm hoping that in the future we will have a specific example from this area as well. A global example is the case with Deepak Mehta, a big internet service provider that was based in several European states, which provided for web hosting of pages that were selling counterfeit goods and who did not assume responsibility for following our applications. So React, together with its members, entered into litigation, and after several years of decision making led to a positive resolution. It was confirmed that as ISP, Deepak Mehta is responsible for the contents they host. They were ordered to delete all such websites that were violating rights. Priorities in this area, resolutions on which we work, is first of all to identify a clear stance, position that internet providers are responsible in such cases. Although again in Macedonia there is no jurisprudence on this that would deal with this directly on a global scale. In the European Union, this is an approach that is already well established. There must be active cooperation between the authorities on the state level and rights holders. I must say that we have good cooperation with the Customs Administration, with the State Market Inspectorate and the police. We have cases that we could point out as cases with positive outcome, that goods were found on the internet but then were confiscated by the Customs Administration or Macedonian police. And the ways in which such cases could be processed on a daily basis should be developed further by developing specific tools. What I mean to say is that there should be active bodies in such institutions that will monitor and take actions to remove, and where there will be active efforts for cooperation between the institutions and the rights holders. This is all I had to say on this. If you have any questions, discussions, suggestions, I am here to respond and discuss. Thank you. Bojan, thank you. As you know, we're slightly behind the agenda, but since we had a lot of interesting presentations on the salient issues of 2020, and this is why on the 4th Annual Internet Governance Forum we would like to open a discussion. If the participants of the webinar would like to ask questions to presenters, you can use several tools, the chat, or feel free to turn your microphone and camera on. Do we have someone who would like to ask a question to Alexandra, Neda, or Bojan? Or should I, as a host, already ask several questions? I don't think we... Apologies. I have just a small addition and explanation. Since we already have a candidate who would like to ask a question, Violeta would like to ask one. Only briefly, I wish to make a small intervention regarding what Bojan was saying with regards to Marnet. Marnet has no legal grounds to be a mediator in such cases, nor does it have a capacity. Under this law, the state did not provide for adequate staffing for Marnet to be a mediator. This is why this function was withdrawn, simply to prevent a situation where it would be overloaded with cases of disputes between domain holders, and this was transferred to the court. An analogy to this would be if I displayed a banner that I'm Coca-Cola without anyone's authorization. In the end, somebody would prosecute me before the court for doing this. This is why this was done. Unfortunately, there is no capacities, nor is there legal basis to ask for capacities. For this, fundamental legislative amendments would be needed. And I think courts are the ones who should really decide on this. Maybe Reactor should work on intervening to strengthen the capacities of the courts and raising the knowledge level in the courts on how to resolve this type of cases in this digital society, so the courts can still react successfully and swiftly to such disputes. Otherwise, Marnet has no possibility, no legal basis to assume this role. This is why it was removed from the initial version of the rules. Initially, there was an idea that it would be possible to solve such disputes. Unfortunately, it is impossible within Marnet, and this is why it was left to the only ones who could do it, who have the mandate to do it. The question is whether they have the time and knowledge to do it. That the courts. This was my brief comment on this part. If I may only add something. I absolutely agree. I understand the background of the decision for Marnet to not engage in arbitration to avoid the situation where Marnet would be solely responsible for all complaints and cases related to domain registration. I find it understandable. However, the practice of most of the countries, even the guidelines and the reasons why UDRP was created as a procedure by ICANN is to establish a more specialized mechanism for action in such cases that would be much more efficient and better suited to resolve these disputes outside of the civil litigation or civil lawsuit. In all states where UDRP is a valid procedure, rights holders do have the right, if they so decide, to engage in a civil litigation. However, in my view, the guidelines to opt to accept UDRP as an alternative is much smarter. In this case, if there is an option for the MK domain to be included in the UDRP procedure and run procedures for the WIPO arbitration court or Czech arbitration court, this will significantly lower the burden for our courts and will entail no additional burden on Marnet. Marnet will only enforce the decisions, if any, to re-register the domains from one user to another, if there is an outcome of the procedure. Just one brief comment before we give the floor to and move on to another topic. This is the essence of the Internet Governance National Forums: to criticize, to identify in a way certain anomalies. So in conclusion, to have them proposed as a discussion topic where such legal amendments, for instance, can be made. The Czech Arbitration Court, UDRP, This would significantly increase the cost of the procedure. I don't know how accessible it would be in Macedonia, but of course the legal basis must be discussed in order to give a possibility to a specialized forum to decide on such issues, whether there will be one instance, two instances, whether this will go to the arbitration court or will it remain to administrative court, or will it remain within an arbitration council, the decisions of which would be final. This is a matter for a serious analysis. What is important is that such discussions should begin as soon as possible so that a solution can be found quickly. Can I now say something? From what you presented, some of the problems you indicated here are the analysis of cybercrime. So in Macedonia, this Center for Safe Internet, the emphasis is on protection of children and young people on several levels, from raising the awareness among the young people, teachers, parents, and this is then spread to the national level. Let me add to what Alexander said. The initiative for government's discussion on the topic rule of law on the internet has been raised in 1995 by the European Commission in response to the fight against dissemination of illegal content, and in this way the internet hotline providers are established, and then the network of internet hotline providers in 1997. And then the European Parliament brought a decision tasking the European Commission with globalizing the issues and opening negotiations with the international partners such as the United Nations. And that is a process. We know this because in the area of disinformation it is very important to know the basic information. In Macedonia, what is done at the moment, I am working on a proposal to build institutional capacities in order to find a way to establish Center for Safer Internet as a basis for the fight against illegal activities online. It is now in the preparatory stage. I know the information because I ran 2 months analysis of the European legislation in great detail, any decisions made by the European Parliament and everything adopted in Macedonia to get to the root of the problem. Because as an organization we are advocating establishing of such centers since 1998, but there was no understanding on the part of the political entities. Now we have some positive vibrations and we are hoping that we will resolve the dispute soon. So I think that when we analyze such situations, they should be analyzed from the perspective of cybercrime. It is very important. It is not just about the protection of the brand or intellectual property. In the background there are different activities by financial crime and by scammers. That is what I wanted to say. Do we have any comment to what Violeta said? Or should we give an opportunity to someone else to ask questions or to comment? This is a good point. Background of all such scams is some financial gain. I agree. But the discussion was around the role and functions of Marnet as in arbitration, in dispute resolution regarding domain registrations. Our audience is quite shy as far as I can see. I have a question to Alexandra regarding digitalization of the educational process during the pandemics. Since it befell on all of us, we were all left wondering. So in terms of implementation of the education digitalization, did you take into consideration the situation in neighboring countries, or international conclusions or lessons learned, and how they have dealt with digital education. Thank you for the question, very logical, great question. Regarding lessons learned, of course, when we tackle such a crucial project, we start with what has been done elsewhere. The results, the extent to which these solutions are applicable in our country. Unfortunately, and maybe for the first time, we found a case where development and implementation of a digital platform that will provide for online learning during this year. Unfortunately, we were in a situation identical in all countries in the world, globally. We were all facing the same challenges. So the crisis happened simultaneously everywhere, and there was no possibility anywhere for someone to identify, analyze, and to work on lessons learned, because everybody was trying to make do. Everybody was making maximum efforts to solve the challenge. Maybe I mentioned in the presentation, with the adoption of the strategy 2127, the Commission also proposes the European Council, the Council of the Union, to come up with lessons learned on the ways in which countries have dealt with the crisis, what solutions they have come up with, and to see if such solutions were adequately corresponding to the situation elsewhere. But this will happen by the end of 2021. So such analysis that are basis for future solutions do not come overnight. So time is left for the solutions to yield results and then to be subject to analysis. This was a broad introduction to why we could not be guided by experiences somewhere in the world. The experience we considered were the solutions applied in the neighboring countries. We were, of course, familiar with the Swedish solution because previously I was working there for quite a long time. In the region countries that are part of the EU, Croatia and Slovenia, they have very similar solutions. If I can draw a comparison, I would say that Macedonia, the team that was working here on the implementation of the platform, went furthest with the functionalities that the platform should support, and certain requirements, demands for the direct users of the platform need to be taken into consideration. On the other hand, Serbia, which is not a member state of the Union, but has a similar organization as we do, has established a partial solution that is not an integral part. In our case, we have an integrated platform, so we could come up with some more detailed analysis, maybe not at the end of this semester, but at the end of the school year, where we will discuss what has been undertaken, and we will be able to identify the omissions, the mistakes, in order to further improve the solutions. I'm not saying that this is an ideal solution, but it was the most adequate solution at the given situation, at the given moment. It can be further adapted, not just to the needs at the moment, but to the needs of the digital era. Because I hear very often that Macedonia is lagging 50 years behind the Western countries, behind the EU countries, that we could not view idealistically to what needs to be done, that we need to corral our ambitions and adapt them to the reality in the field. I personally disagree. I have the opposite view. I think now is the opportunity to make ambitious plans which will be supported by strategies and policies for timely and adequate implementation of the measures which could benefit from the technology advances on the global scales. And we should start there, so that if we wish for our country to achieve rapid convergence in this segment with the Union. As you know, this is only one segment of the broader digitalization of societies, and practically as early as in 2017 the European Commission tasked the EU member states with adopting strategies for digital skills and digitalization of the societies, which are a starting point for our digital agenda as well. Thank you. Thank you, Alexandra. Do we have any other questions or comments? If not, we can already go back to the agenda of this forum. The next topic is look to the future. I'm hoping that we have with us Ilian Jogagovsky, co-founder of Pro Maps and Technology Shapes Future, aficionado. Yes, I'm the one. Who will present artificial intelligence, the new kid on the block. Thank you. Can you hear me well? Yes, and we can also see the presentation. First, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this conference, and congratulations for managing to hold the conference, for keeping the continuity. The title of the presentation contains a question mark, because it only seems that the artificial intelligence is the new kid on the block. It is here for quite some time already. Those dealing with it for years know this. But recently we started perceiving it a bit more intensely. Today I will speak about several issues. First, about the basic concepts of artificial intelligence. I think that the public sometimes has a wrong idea about the artificial intelligence, some current trends in the development of the artificial intelligence, its application and risks, and the future of artificial intelligence and our expectations from it. With regards to the basic concepts of artificial intelligence, there are two approaches to defining it, and there is strong AI and weak artificial intelligence. Strong artificial intelligence, the position of it is that the aim is to establish general artificial intelligence completely equivalent to humans. And it is defined as a system that is able to reason, solve problems, take decisions, plan, learn, and communicate in every walk of life. When we define it like this, it is clear that we're still not there. Therefore, we have to stress that any instance of artificial intelligence that we are discussing today is actually an instance of weak artificial intelligence. To illustrate where we are at the moment regarding artificial intelligence today, I will use an analogy, and I think that it illustrates the matter well. Historically, people always wanted to fly, but for as long as they tried to do it imitating the birds, pasting feathers and waving their arms, it did not end well. only when we equipped ourselves with knowledge, dynamics of fluids, the researches of Bernoulli on the one hand. On the other hand, we invented the internal combustion engines. We created a situation that we could arrive to the invention called the plane. Using planes, people started flying. And today, using such technological devices, they can fly faster and longer than any bird. However, no plane can fly in the night through a thick forest and land on a branch, as the owl can. This is the relation between the artificial intelligence and the human intelligence, this relation between the owl and the plane. Artificial intelligence can do many things quicker, more efficient than the humans, but it cannot do all the humans can. So the term is a bit unfortunate, because the public understands intelligence to mean awareness, consciousness. And this is seen in the way that we treat machines. We give them anthropomorphic characteristics. The computer is playing tricks on me, while the computer is actually doing only what we have told it to do. So I will now focus on the second approach of artificial intelligence, weak artificial intelligence, but it doesn't follow that it is not worthy of review. This weak artificial or narrow AI, this is the level attained, technology level attained at the moment, is actually emulating intelligence, and it has narrow area of application. Best definition is the one I placed on the screen, that we are creating large and complex functions and bringing them together with even larger data sets to give these functions ability to predict future characteristics of unknown data. It sounds a bit unclear, but when you look at the sentence, I believe it clearly depicts what we are trying to achieve with the artificial intelligence. And when we say that today the application of artificial intelligence is in rather narrow areas, it means that if you teach a system to play chess, you cannot expect that the same system will know how to drive a car. One system knows how to play chess, another knows how to drive a car, but they are a narrowly specialized area for which we have trained them. To discuss this issue, I believe it would be good to make the distinction of between several notions that are used practically as synonyms, although they aren't, but we encounter them as synonyms in everyday life. What is the ratio between artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the so-called deep learning? The differences are in some nuances. Machine learning, something that only one aspect of machine learning overlaps with artificial intelligence, but let's not take that direction. So machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, but the difference is in a nuance that can mainly be seen through this. Machine learning is passive learning from data sets, while artificial intelligence, using machine learning as a tool, we are trying to make it an agent that will engage in interaction with the actual environment and will learn from the environment and change it. This is the nuance that makes a difference. Then deep learning, that is often discussed at the moment, is a full subset of machine learning, and the difference is that machine learning also encompasses other aspects to learning, although recently deep learning becomes the predominant way of machine learning. And deep learning is based mainly on the so-called neural networks, deep neural networks. What is missing on this slide, and it is important to mention, is the so-called cousin discipline, data mining. And data mining is most similar to machine learning, and it has different purposes. Data mining has the purpose in itself to recognize unknown patterns in big data sets, while machine learning uses this process as an intermediary stop to learning certain activities. The technologies are very similar, they have different objectives. When I said that it is not exactly a new kid on the block, this is what I referred to. This is a brief historic overview of artificial intelligence. The concepts of artificial intelligence have begun in the 50s and 60s of the 20th century, 1950s, 1960s, and they remained in the domain of academia as demonstration exercise, primarily due to the restrictions of the hardware power. The computers then and now could not be compared. And when we see why we need so much computing power when it comes to artificial intelligence, in the 80s, this concept found its embodiment in machine learning algorithms and approaches and technologies. The so-called expert systems were very popular then, such as simulation of your home doctor. They were very interesting, but they could not meet the expectations of machine learning fully because they were insufficiently flexible. At that time, the neural networks were already a familiar notion. If I'm not mistaken, when I was a student in the 80s, quite some time ago, that was not my concentration, but I believe that those with concentration of computer sciences had the subject of neural networks. But in the 90s and in the 2000s, they started spreading with the advancement of the processor power of computers and the availability of huge data sets through which these neural networks could be trained. And it exploded in the recent years, again with the propagation of internet since 1995, and until the mid of the first decade of 21st century it was here. But the actual explosion happened a bit later with the availability of mobile devices and availability of a lot of data and computing power. This led us to these phenomenal deep learning abilities. I will only scratch the surface here. I will not go into details of all aspects that are behind this excitement about machine learning. This is seemingly simple. These are neural networks. As we said, they are the leading technologies for machine learning. And they are to some extent inspired by the ways in which human brains function, although we said we don't know very much about this thing, but we know generally how the brain works, how the neurons work, and we have made models of it in the shape of these nodes that have several inputs, as you can see in the lower part of the screen, with various weight factors. And there is a transfer function that brings them together, and then there is a switch which says what output will come out of the neuron. It looks simple, but when you connect those nodes, as in the upper part of the picture, so that every node is connected to all others, such weight factors influencing one another to compute how the actual output of the entire network would be becomes a rather complex story. It involves a lot of maths, but essentially it will be some calculus equations that we need to solve to find the result. I will not burden you with details of this area, but in the end there is a resource, a YouTube channel that explains these issues in layman terms, and it is very interesting for anyone who would like to open the hood and see what the technology of artificial intelligence is. Otherwise, we have all been part of creating artificial intelligence. We have all seen capture images, which means completely automated set telling machines and humans apart. This is Turing's test to see that we are not a computer. This is one of the classical capture variants, where you have two words and the system knows exactly what one of the words is, and it wants you to resolve the other word so that it can create a data set that will have the right labels. And this is how we have all participated in creating ginormous data sets that can be used later to create artificial intelligence. Or Google used this for digitalization of an enormous number of books. If you have filled out capture tests, you have participated in digitalization of books. Now there is a different option. You see images, mark all traffic signs. It suggests that we are participating today in creation of data sets that will be used for artificial intelligence, used for autonomous cars. Areas of application of artificial intelligence, I would like to classify them. One is logical reasoning, for instance, playing chess or solving math problems. Then navigation, manipulation, self-driving cars, robots. Translation of languages at a semantic level in terms of understanding the substance, the essence of what is translated, not just word for word translation. And we can see enormous progress if we compare the machine translation throughout the years. Perception of the environment, recognizing visual, audio, sensitive and even olfactory patterns, and the forecasting and optimization, time, cost, interests. This is of course at a general level. We can see the specific application of artificial intelligence. There is no area of life where artificial intelligence is not applied, starting with personal assistants that we'll know, Siri and Alexa, through feeds in social networks powered by powerful artificial intelligence that can sometimes be problematic. We will discuss this in the chapter on challenges. Weather forecast, self-driven cars, automation of production, anti-spam filters, etc. I should not be reading all the list. Face recognition. These are all instances of artificial intelligence. What I find most interesting are two of these applications in healthcare and science, which are partially interlinked. some 10 days ago, Google's DeepMind practically resolved the problem of 3D folding of proteins, which is of outstanding significance, especially in the context of the pandemic. The shape of the so-called spikes of the coronavirus are defined by the ways in which the proteins are folded in 3 dimensions. So if you know how they fold, we can create a substance that will stop or compensate for them. And how the proteins folded in 3D shape is very difficult research. It is a seriously difficult area of research. And now artificial intelligence by Google has done in several days what previously took months. And it is not only that area of science. There are other areas where artificial intelligence or data mining can be used in order to create hypotheses for enormous data sets. Previously, maybe you would need 10 days to formulate a hypothesis and then confirm it through research. And if your hypothesis was wrong, then tough luck. Quite the opposite. Today, artificial intelligence can formulate dozens of hypotheses and you can check them. It accelerates the scientific progress with our intelligent assistants, and this is truly fascinating. This is why things are moving so fast forward in the area of science. Also journalism with a question mark. There are articles that are written by artificial intelligence, which is technically questionable, although I think that many of such articles would be much better than some articles that we might find in our portals. And also entertainment. Netflix is selecting movies that you would like to watch, music you would like to listen to. Practically there is no area that has not been touched by this. For illustration purposes, I put here some personas of artificial intelligence. We do want to give them anthropomorphic features. What is interesting in this area? IBM Watson is the intelligence that won a quiz in 1991, and it is not naive. They need to listen to the questions, understand it as humans do. First, to listen, to digitalize the question into a format understandable for it to understand and answer the question. Then Deep Blue, more senior ones can remember, this is the artificial intelligence that destroyed the chess, because in 1997 it won against the world chess champion. It is interested now to view it in the context of Queen's Gambit. Chess is now experiencing a revival. And in the resources I have put a link to a video to see how this IBM debater debates on an equal footing with people on sociological topics set in advance. So it is not that they analyze some technology. No, these are sociological topics on the basis of very, very many texts it has analyzed. And not only that, it can respond to arguments presented by humans, which seems almost unbelievable. And it is no wonder that people start thinking of those instances of AI as personas. They are not personas, they are not persons, they are very complex algorithms. Google AlphaGo and AlphaZero, this is very impressive. it started playing the Japanese game Go, which is much more complex than chess, and it is based on recognizing patterns. We as a human race are very proud of it, and we believe that it will be very difficult for computers to reach that level. They could think in that way, but AlphaGo in 2015 won against a professional Go player for the first time. This is a Far East game, Korea, Japan. In 2016, it won against a player with the 9th dan, so-called, and in 2017, it won against the world champion, the #1 Go player. This was AlphaGo. AlphaZero in that same year, after 3 days of training, won against AlphaGo 100-0. Such acceleration took place in the area of deep learning that it is simply unbelievable. And then Microsoft DAI and Zo, these are chatbots that caused controversies because they were Twitter bots, and through interaction with the public they soon became racist, which is very interesting. Amazon Alexa, Siri, you know them. Eugene Kostman is an artificial intelligence that in 2018 allegedly passed the Turing's test. Turing's test is to discuss via a terminal using text with an entity on the other side, and if 30% of the people do not recognize that this is a computer and not a human, it is considered that the algorithm has passed the Turing test. Eugene passed it allegedly, something that the research was not entirely fair, but if Eugene did not do it, very soon we will have machines that will pass the Turing's test. It doesn't mean that they attained consciousness. There are some resources about persons creating artificial intelligence. You cannot recognize whether this is an actual or an artificial person. NVIDIA, in the resources you have a link to see how this artificial intelligence can start from a sketch and create a work of art, etc. From the professional aspect, there are several platforms that make these things possible, and these are the 4 large players. TensorFlow, open platform created by Google initially, Microsoft's platform, IBM Watson Development Cloud, and AI on Amazon. But this is of more interest for the software developers who will need to decide on one of the options. What I mean to say is that this is not so exotic anymore. It becomes a commercial affair available to a larger array of consumers. We spoke a lot about today's state of play regarding artificial intelligence. It is of key importance to see what we will do about the risks or dilemmas. There are many people who are worried, some of them rightly so, some of them with no basis. There are some things that we could discuss as ethical risks or dilemmas. I mentioned them previously. For instance, the artificial intelligence controlling your news feeds. They're not completely neutral. They're practically doing something that is a task given to them in the background, and the aim is to keep you at the platform for as long as possible. Is it ethical? Probably not. How can we control this? It is not entirely clear. And I must stress that in this area we have more questions than answers as we are facing such situations. I will also not speak about the ethical connotations in terms of publicity stunts, such as giving citizenship to one instance of artificial intelligence. This is more of a publicity stunt, but the key ethical problem is the influence they exert. Because when they control the feed on the social networks, what happens is that they will notice your bias, and it is then strengthening the bias. This is how this large division is happening today. Other risks are of social nature. They existed always. What will happen when the artificial intelligence takes a job? On a short-term basis, such issues can be valid. On a long-term basis, we need to find a way to cope with the changes, to invent new jobs, as it did happen with the arrival of every new technology. This technology is a bit more intrusive. It does enter all areas of life. I'm not purporting to have the answers, I'm just listing questions. Privacy. Although this is a risk, there are no big dilemmas here. If you want to be connected, you will sacrifice some of your privacy. You have absolute privacy only if you are not connected to any platforms, and it is of key importance to prevent the abuse of things that are known about you. Security risks. I think that this is mainly in the technology and imagination realm. The engineers are doing their work. I think that it is a very small risk that artificial intelligence goes insane and create havoc. Although there was a situation that 2 Boeing planes fell from the sky because an algorithm kicked in that misidentified the situation. So the question is, who will be to blame if a self-driven car is implicated in a crash? My father was working in Saddam Hussein's time, building dams and huge objects, and the rule was if a foreigner has caused a traffic accident, the foreigner is to blame, because if they didn't come to Iraq, the accident would not have happened. If we employ such principle, technology will never develop, but the real question is what principle to apply. There are more questions than answers, I will say again. And we have also imaginary risks that the artificial intelligence becomes more intelligent than us. You have seen the Terminator movie. I personally do not believe in this. I must say that the question of this strong AI, actual intelligence, is also a philosophical question. And the philosophical question is not only when, but if at all is such instance possible. The debate is going strongly about this. I would not engage in this, although it is very interesting debate. On this slide you have a list of many resources. I would like to highlight some of them. First among them, if you are interested, is graphic overview of how some of the algorithms work. I recommend it warmly, it is phenomenal. Then project debate I mentioned. A video that is impressive for you to see what is happening. About protein folding. The third link speaks to that. And especially interesting are those where the artificial intelligence can assist humans who have no limbs. And the final link, if you would like to look inside the hood. A disclaimer, a lot of maths is involved in this video, but It is rather basic maths. It is not so complex, but it is very impressive, and I warmly recommend them. And now, what about the future? What can we expect? You will see this slide often as an illustration of what can be expected of the AI. This is a slide I do not agree with, and this is why I posted it here. It says that by 2040, the artificial general intelligence will be attained. We will have a computer equivalent to a human. I do not agree with this. And that by 2060, we will reach artificial superintelligence, intelligence superior to the total intelligence of the human race. I would agree if we restrict these two areas. In some areas, I'm sure we will attain artificial intelligence. It will be almost impossible to differentiate it from the human intelligence, and which will be superior in every sense, but to this particular area, and not in terms of life as a whole. So we can expect that our smart assistants will continue helping us, will continue making our lives better and more interesting, and as every technology, in the end, whether they will do good or evil, essentially depends on us. The atom bomb is a result of knowledge about the physics of atoms' core, and it was a human's choice whether they will make nuclear power plants or bombs. The same goes about this or any other technology. So stay tuned. It is a very interesting time to be alive. We will see many more interesting things. Thank you for your attention. My point was that, as Iliancho mentioned, Google Translate is very different now from what it used to be a year or two ago. And I think that there is drastic difference between it in different languages. For instance, in Macedonian, the quality and the sense of the sentences linguistically, semantically, it has greatly improved. You can use them. I have noticed that for some languages, and large languages which have a large book repository and huge impact, for instance, for the Turkish language, it is far from this quality. What is the reason? Can someone answer to this? Maybe it depends on the input, how it is built, who is building it. I don't think that Macedonian language is more important, and therefore it has richer input for Macedonian than for the Turkish language, maybe. Yes, it is strange. I don't know about the Turkish language. It is a bit arbitrary whether it is better or worse. Yes, Macedonian is much better recently. Reading Macedonian out loud was not good now, but there is an interesting platform, Maika, which can read Macedonian perfectly. Maika.mk, I think it is. Write whatever you wish in Cyrillic alphabet, somebody is reading it. It is reading it perfectly. I don't know who did it. I was reviewing the input. I had a chance conversation with people from Turkey. They said that the quality of translation was awful. And I commented that 3 or 4 years ago it was like this in Macedonian, but now I'm positively surprised. And I'm using it often. After this, I'm using a human filter with legal terminology and natural language. I have no answer. I don't know what Turkish would be worse. It is not just Turkish, also German. It can put you in a completely different context. It goes completely wrong. I don't know, maybe we're a root language, I don't know. Okay, any other questions? I have a question. Some of the risks or the dilemmas that Iliancho listed was privacy. You will either accept it or not. How could we, within the realm of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning, employ privacy as default and security as default principles? It is now about the human factor. Artificial intelligence will process the data as we tell it to. Probably privacy is the main step. Instead of setting a default that I'm sharing everything, maybe default should be that I'm sharing nothing, and only if I wish I can authorize sharing. And it is also a matter of regulation. This is a human issue. It is not a technology issue. It is human issue, and it can be resolved by regulation. And of course the key issues are regulation needs to be enforced. Who is controlling the controllers? Who is watching the watchman? And it never ends. At some point you need to take a leap of faith, trust an institution, and that is it. It is all down to trust to the institutions. Thank you. Any other question? Can I ask or comment? Dimitar, the floor is yours. Thank you for the invitation. It was really an outstanding presentation on artificial intelligence. I don't have any particular question. I would like to comment something. In the presentation, I saw that there was a question mark about journalism, and I know why is that journalism there. I understand it well. And I think that in some sectors, especially in the media and social media, when it comes to engaging artificial intelligence, the processes in the states should run in parallel to raise the awareness about the risks involved in the artificial intelligence. We as a society, but not just Macedonia, also beyond in the region and on a global scale, we saw what happened when people were not prepared for such rapid development of social media and journalism via social media, because there was this so-called bubble journalism some years ago, where there was some artificial intelligence influencing what people need to read or hear. It influenced the elections, especially in the United States and in other countries. We all remember what happened. So I'm not sure that we need to discuss the development of artificial intelligence in the area of media, social media and journalism, without having in parallel the awareness raising about the risk of misuse of this artificial intelligence. Such risks, of course, exist in other areas, not just in the area of media, but this sector is extremely sensitive and vulnerable, and it also influences the democratic development. So I think it would not be good. I think such rapid development of artificial intelligence, it should not be allowed that the democratic and legal aspects are lagging behind, only catching up with the technology later, and then we will face the issues of what happened, what we did, how come we did not forecast such consequences. So I think that these two developments should run in parallel in every state. This was a comment. Thank you. Thank you for the nice words. I would like to follow up on this. Consequences you are mentioning have already happened. We are living this dystopian reality where the humanity is divided into two segments, and each of them thinks about the other, that they live in a delusion. And it is for the most part due to the controlling of social feeds. They are only amplifying your initial beliefs that you held. So if you started taking one of the directions, you will receive inputs that will confirm that you are right all the time. This is a bubble that is created. What is the solution to this issue? I don't know. It is very complex. I think that the only potential solution is on a very long-term basis, and it would mean a serious education of people about this new era. We still have the education, the structure, and largely the contents of it are based on the 19th century. I'm not talking about Macedonia only. The structure, primary, secondary, university, it is following the structure of the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, which ended centuries ago, and we're still teaching people in the same way. You go to the university, what you will learn when you're starting the university becomes obsolete by the time you graduate. It is very difficult to keep the pace. So at least we need to teach the people that it is very difficult, and we need to gradually teach people how to verify facts, how to check their sources. And maybe in this journalism question mark, there could be where artificial intelligence can be controlled by different entities with different interests, which can be used as fact checkers, so that humans are not fact checkers. Maybe this could be a solution, but I don't have a final answer. This was done in the United States 4 years ago, and it turned out that the fact checkers also had some bias through some non-governmental organizations, so the damage was done. I agree with the long-term solution, but we need to start with it immediately. We cannot wait. If we do not catch the trend, if it is not part of the curricula and awareness raising through non-governmental organizations, media, about the advantages but also the risks of the artificial intelligence, especially in the developed world, consequences could really be disastrous. These are serious matters which you have presented and which have happened. Maybe we are engineers here, but the fundamental human rights and democracy, especially for us as a young state, this can be the fundament of our existence. If we have our human rights and democracy violated, if we are put in bubbles on how to think, then we will start thinking if we really needed the artificial intelligence. Thank you. Thank you for the comments and for the discussion. This is why an event of this kind is taking place. Do we have any other comments or questions? And if not, we can already start closing the event. No questions? The Internet Governance Forum, Macedonia, or the so-called IGF MKD, is an open, inclusive and informal forum for dialogue of issues of Internet governance among all stakeholders in Macedonian society, the government, MPs, private sector, civil society, technical community, education, media, end users, etc. The aim of the forum is to raise the awareness and promote better understanding of Internet governance, building or strengthening capacity of such stakeholders to actively participate in the national Internet governance processes, to facilitate the discussion, exchange opinions and cooperation on matters related to the Internet. This year, we all found ourselves in an unpredicted situation, unforeseen situation, and the difficult circumstances. In the past, the event took place face-to-face. It had more open discussions. Today, this year, all events, all regional and global Internet governance events have taken place online. Before I close, I would like to thank the presenters, the participants, and of course the entire team of IGF MKD, because over a short span of time we managed to also technically organize this event. And I would also like to thank Finki for the technical support, to Professor Anastas and the others, of course. Without further ado, in the previous years, topics were a bit different or more diverse, regarding multi-stakeholder or regarding technical community, media and end users, while this year, more than in the past, we paid attention to active issues, to the current topic of the pandemics, a theme of the pandemics, and ways in which we could use the Internet during the crisis. Also, we had a second discussion today, aiming to see a bit further into the future, that is the artificial intelligence, machine learning, and of course deep learning. I know that everybody is tired already. So without further ado, I would like to thank all the participants and presenters once again, and we can officially say that the 4th annual Internet Governance Forum organized by IGF MKD was successful, and we can close it. Thank you all, and you can give your comments or suggestions how to improve it. Greetings to all. I would like to congratulate you. Thank you. Thank you, all the best. Stay healthy, well, and happy holidays.